Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got something pretty interesting on the desk today. Usually we're talking about the abstract stuff, right?
Yeah, cloud architecture, software stacks,
Yeah,
the code.
exactly. The code that runs the world. But today we are getting physical. We're cracking open the metal box. We are talking about enterprise server management.
It's the invisible foundation. I mean, you can have the best code in the world, but if the server it's running on overheats,
Or a drive fails.
right, or someone literally trips over a power cord in the data center, it doesn't matter how good the software is, the cloud is really just someone else's computer, and that computer needs to be managed.
And to guide us through this hardware maze, we're using a very specific lens today. The Dell PowerEdge Operate V2 exam.
Codename D-PE-OE-01.
Right. Now, before you tune out thinking this is just some, dry test prep session, hold on, because looking at these exam questions is actually a brilliant way to understand how a modern data center really ticks.
I completely agree. Certifications like this, they're basically a roadmap of things that will definitely go wrong in your career.
Yeah.
If you understand the exam questions, you aren't just memorizing answers. You are learning the actual workflow of a systems administrator.
So lay the groundwork for us. If I'm walking into a testing center to take this exam, what am I actually up against? Give us the tale of the tape.
Well, it is a bit of a sprint. You've got 90 minutes on the clock to answer 50 questions.
Okay, fast-paced.
Very. And the format is a mix of standard, multiple choice, and multiple response. You know, those select all that apply types that everyone just loves to hate.
Oh yeah, the worst. And what's the bar to clear?
The passing score is set at 63%.
63%. That feels surprisingly low, doesn't it?
It sounds low, but the questions are designed to be tricky scenarios. They test really specific, nuanced knowledge. And here is the kicker, and honestly, the reason we're doing this deep dive.
What's the...
63% gets you the piece of paper. But in the real world, if you only know 63% of how to keep your servers running, you are going to have a lot of sleepless nights.
That is a very fair point. So we're aiming for a bit better than passing today.
Definitely.
We've pulled 10 specific questions from the source material. These are real scenarios you might see on the exam or just out in the wild in the data center. We're going to break them down, not just to find the right answer, but to understand the why behind it.
The full life cycle of the machine.
Exactly. We've organized this into 4 parts: initial setup, remote management, scaling up, and diagnostics.
From unboxing to decommissioning, let's get into it.
Let's start at the beginning. Part 1. Initial configuration and the BIOS layer.
The birth of the server.
Right, so here's the scenario for question 1. You've just unboxed a brand new PowerEdge server. It smells like fresh plastic and static electricity.
Best smell in the world.
You rack it, you cable it, you turn it on. There is no operating system yet, no Windows Server, no Linux. It is a blank slate.
Nothing but bare metal.
You need to configure a hardware RAID array so you actually have a logical drive to install the OS onto. The question asks, which tool is primarily used for local disk management in this specific state?
And the options are tricky because they are all real Dell tools. You have A, Open Manage Mobile, B, System Inventory, C, Device Settings and BIOS, and D, Support Assist.
This is a classic timeline trap, isn't it? Because my admin instinct is to grab a management tool. Open Manage Mobile sounds convenient. I just walk up with my phone, right?
Yeah, via the quick sync bezel.
And Support Assist is supposed to help with everything.
In a fully running system, sure. But look at the context of the question. You have no OS. Support Assist generally runs as a service on the operating system, or at least it needs the lifecycle controller to be fully initialized in a support context. It's way too high level for this stage.
Okay, so what about Open Manage Mobile?
It's great for monitoring status, checking health, but you aren't going to use it to build the foundational block structure of your storage drives. It's just not the right tool for local initial disk management.
So we are too early for the fancy software tools.
Exactly. You have to go to the metal. The answer is C, Device Settings and BIOS.
Walk us through that. What's actually happening?
When you hit the power button, the server goes through POST, power on self-test. That's the BIOS waking up the hardware. The RAID controller is a physical piece of hardware, usually a ProARS card.
Right.
So you enter the BIOS setup, usually by mashing F2 during the boot screen, and you navigate to device settings. The RAID controller's firmware lives right there. You tell it, hey, take these 5 physical drives and turn them into one RAID 5 virtual disk.
So you have to build the floor before you can put the furniture in the room, the OS being the furniture.
Precisely. It's the chicken and the egg scenario. You can't use software tools to build the drive that the software needs to sit on. For the exam, always look for the phrase pre-OS or no OS installed. that almost always points you toward BIOS or lifecycle controller settings.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's stay in the BIOS for a minute, but shift to question 9. This one is about power, and honestly, it feels like a bit of a philosophical debate in the IT world.
Ah, the system profile debate. This is huge for data center efficiency.
Right. The question asks, in the BIOS settings, which system profile should be selected to give the operating system full control over processor power management?
Okay.
Your options are A, performance, B, performance per watt OSC, maximum efficiency, or D, workload optimized.
This question's really asking who drives the car, the hardware, firmware, or the operating system.
And if I'm an admin, I'm thinking, well, I bought this incredibly expensive server, I want performance. So I pick A.
And that is exactly what a lot of people do. But if you select performance, the BIOS essentially tells the processor, run at max turbo frequency all the time.
Just constantly redlining.
Yes. It disables a lot of the power-saving features, like C-states. It burns more electricity and generates more heat, regardless of whether the server is actually doing any work. It's like putting a brick on the gas pedal, even when you are stopped at a red light.
So relying purely on the performance setting is just really inefficient.
It is. The correct answer here, and really the industry standard for most virtualized environments, is B, performance per watt OS.
The OS being the key word there.
Yes. This setting tells the hardware to step back and let the operating system decide. Modern OSs, and especially hypervisors like VMware, ESXi, or Hyper-V, they are incredibly smart.
They see the whole picture.
Exactly. They know exactly what the workload needs, millisecond by millisecond. They use things called P-states to throttle the CPU down when it's idle, and then they ramp it up instantly when web traffic hits.
So performance per watt OS gives you the performance when you actually need it, but saves your electric bill when you don't. That seems like the smart play.
It's the only smart play for modern setups. And for the exam, remember, if the question asks for the OS to have control, the answer must have OS in the title.
All right, let's fast forward to the end of this server's life. This is question 2.
Okay.
We are decommissioning the box. Maybe we're selling it or moving it to a non-secure lab. We need to wipe it clean. The question asks, which feature allows you to clear all data and reset all configurations before the server leaves the building?
Let's hear the options.
A, system erase, B, power cycle, C, virtual reseat, or D, hardware inventory.
Well, let's rule some of those out immediately. Power cycle just means turning it off and on again. That definitely doesn't delete your data.
Right. And virtual reseat?
That's a cool troubleshooting trick where you simulate physically unplugging a blade server, but it doesn't wipe anything. Hardware inventory just lists what's inside.
So we are looking at A, system erase, but how is this different from just, formatting the hard drives? I think that's where people get confused.
Huge difference. Formatting drives just clears the primary storage. But a server remembers things in a lot of other places. The IDR cache might have user credentials or email addresses for alerts. The BIOS might have network settings, static IPs, or asset tags.
Things you really don't want leaking out.
Exactly. System erase is a feature built into the lifecycle controller. It is a scorched earth policy. It wipes the drives, resets the BIOS, clears the NVRAM, resets the ID RAM. It returns the machine to the exact state it was in when it rolled off the factory floor.
It gives the server total amnesia.
Total amnesia. And that is absolutely essential for security. You do not want your internal IP addressing scheme or old admin passwords leaving the building on a surplus truck. If the exam asks about decommissioning or repurposing securely, system erase is your answer.
Okay, so that's the life cycle: setup, power, and death. Now let's talk about the day-to-day operations. Part 2, remote management. This is where we get into the IDRA.
The integrated Dell Remote Access Controller, basically the tiny computer inside the big computer.
Question 3 presents a nightmare scenario. You are the admin, it's 2 in the morning, you get an alert, the server is completely unresponsive, the operating system has crashed.
Blue screen of death.
Exactly. Kernel panic, frozen solid, but you need to see the console to figure out what the error message actually says. Which IDRA feature lets you do this? Options are A, support assist collection, B, virtual console, C, SNMP traps, or D, group manager.
Now, logically, if the OS is dead, how can you see the screen? Your normal remote desktop tools won't work. RDP is dead. SSH is dead.
So what's the lifeline?
That is the magic of out-of-band management. The IDRA has its own processor, its own memory, and its own physical network connection. It does not care if Windows is completely imploded.
Totally separate.
Yes, it sits there watching the hardware video output directly. So the answer is
Yeah.
B, virtual console.
So even if the main brain of the server is dead, the IDRAC is still alive.
Exactly. The virtual console scrapes the video feed right from the graphics chip and streams it to your web browser. You can sit in your pajamas at home, log into the IDRC, see the blue screen error code, and even mount a virtual ISO file to reinstall the OS, all without ever touching the physical server.
That is an absolute lifesaver at 2 a.m. But to do that, you need to be connected to the IDRC. Which brings us to question 6. This one is about the plumbing, the cabling.
Cabling is always a tricky part in a dense rack.
The question asks, a technician is configuring the IDRAC network and selects shared LUM mode. Which physical port will the IDRC use for communication? Options are A, dedicated IDRAC port, B, standard network interface port, C, serial port, D, USB management port.
First, we need to decode the acronym, LOM.
LAN on motherboard.
Right, it's just the fancy enterprise term for the built-in Ethernet ports on the back of the server. Now, most PowerEdge servers have a specific port on the back with a little wrench icon next to it. That is the dedicated IDRA's port.
So if you plug into that one, the management traffic is physically separated from your data traffic.
Exactly. But the question specifically says shared alarm.
Shared means exactly what it sounds like.
Yep. Maybe you ran out of switch ports. Maybe you just don't have enough cabling budget to run 2 drops to every server. So you tell the IDRIC, hey, hitch a ride on the main data cable. The answer is B, standard network interface port.
So your management traffic, like you typing commands into the virtual console, is mixing with the server's data traffic, like users accessing file.
It is sharing the physical wire, yes. The IDRC filters out the packets meant for it based on the MAC address or VLAN tagging. It's very efficient, but you have to be careful.
Why is that?
Well, if the server gets hit with a massive DDoS attack, or even just a huge file transfer that saturates that network link, you might lose your connection to the IDRs just when you need it most.
Oh, because the pipe is totally full. That's a great insight. So dedicated is safer, but shared is cheaper. But for the exam, shared LUM uses the standard network interface.
Correct.
Moving on to part 3. Scaling up. Because managing one server is fun, but managing 100 servers is a job.
A very hard job if you don't have the right tools.
Question 8 asks, which tool is best suited for managing a fleet of 100 PowerEdge servers from a single centralized dashboard? Options are A, Open Manage Enterprise, B, IDRAC Web Interface, C, System Setup Utility, or D, Lifecycle Controller.
We just spent time talking about how great the IDRAC is. But the IDRC is a one-to-one tool. You log into server A, then you log out. You log into server B.
If you have 100 servers, or 1,000, you are going to get carpal tunnel syndrome trying to patch them all individually.
Exactly. So IDRC is the microscope. We need a telescope. The answer is A, Open Manage Enterprise.
How does that differ from the IDRS?
It's a virtual appliance. Software you run centrally in your data center. It goes out over the network and discovers all those 100 IDRX. It pulls all that data into one single pane of glass. You could say, update the BIOS on all 100 servers at 3:00 a.m. tonight, and just click one button.
It's the air traffic control tower.
While the IDRMA is the cockpit of the individual plane. Good analogy. For the exam, the keyword is always multiple servers, or fleet. If it's one server, it's IDRA. If it's many, it's Open Manage Enterprise.
Got it. Now let's talk about reliability. Because when you have 100 servers, things break constantly.
It's just a statistical certainty.
Question 4 focuses on power redundancy. It asks, what is the specific benefit of setting the power supply unit redundancy to grid redundancy mode? The options usually involve things like saving power or adding capacity.
This one trips a lot of people up.
The correct answer listed is B, protects against the failure of an entire power source. But wait, don't all dual power supplies do that? If one breaks, the other takes over, right?
Not necessarily. Standard redundancy is called 1+1 or hot spare. If power supply A pops a capacitor and dies inside the server, power supply B takes the load. But that assumes both power supplies are still getting electricity from the wall.
Okay, I see where this is going.
What if the PDU, the power strip in the rack, blows a fuse? Or the circuit breaker for that whole row of racks trip?
If both power supplies are plugged into that same dead circuit, the server goes dark regardless of how many working power supplies it has inside it.
Exactly. Grid redundancy is a specific configuration where you tell the server, I have connected power supply 1 to grid A, which is, say, the city power, and I connected power supply 2 to grid B, which is maybe a diesel generator or a completely separate substation.
So it's aware of the external environment.
Right. The server then balances the load specifically to ensure that if grid A completely vanishes, the server survives on grid B without dropping a single packet.
So it protects you against the environment failing, not just the server hardware failing.
Correct. It's about external resilience.
Speaking of hardware failing, question 7, this one actually blew my mind a little bit. It's about memory.
Ah, the DDC question.
The question asks, which memory technology allows a server to continue operating even if an entire memory chip on a DIMM fails? Options are A, logical processing, B, fault-resilient memory, C, secure boot, or D, device data correction.
So most listeners are probably familiar with ECC RAM, error correcting code.
Right, that's standard in servers.
Yeah, it can fix a single bit flip. A 0 turns into a 1 because of background radiation or whatever. ECC catches it and flips it back. No crash.
But the question says an entire chip on the RAM stick dies. That's millions of bits.
Usually, yes, that is an immediate crash. Blue screen, halt everything. But in high-end enterprise gear, we have device data correction, or DDC. Sometimes it's called SDDC, single device data correction.
How does that possibly work?
Think of it almost like RAID for your RAM. The memory controller writes data across the physical memory chips in such a way that if one chip completely disappears, literally, physically dies, the controller can mathematically reconstruct the missing data from the remaining chips on the fly.
That is incredible. So the hardware is literally failing physically, the silicon is dead, and the server just does the math and keeps running.
The OS might not even notice other than logging a hardware alert. It buys you time to schedule a maintenance window instead of suffering a massive outage at midday. So for the exam, if you see an entire chip failure, think DDC.
That brings us perfectly to our final section. Diagnostics. How do we know when things are breaking if the server just keeps running? Question 10. It's simple, but vital. You are walking down the aisle of the data center. You see a hard drive carrier with a blinking amber light. What does it mean?
The options they give are usually things like rebuilding, online, being identified, or failed.
And the answer is C. The drive has failed.
Visual indicators are a language. Green is good. Blinking green is healthy activity. Amber is a warning. Blinking amber is a scream for help.
So there's no ambiguity there.
None. If you see that pure blinking amber, that drive is toast. Pull it out. Put a new one in.
Is there ever a time where blinking amber is a good thing?
Not really. Sometimes you might see a pattern, like green, amber, green, which might indicate a drive rebuild is in progress. But pure blinking amber. Dead drive. The exam wants you to know that color code instinctively.
Short and sweet. Blinking amber equals bad. Finally, question 5. We need to know the history. We want to know what killed that drive, or if this server has a history of power issues. The question asks, which log contains the detailed history of all hardware changes, firmware updates, and critical errors since the server was first powered on?
Options are A, OS log, B, keyboard log, C, lifecycle log, D, security log.
The trap here is the OS log, isn't it? Because I'm so used to looking at Windows Event Viewer or the var log messages in Linux.
But those logs only exist while that specific OS is installed. If I wipe Windows and install Linux, the entire history is gone.
Good point.
Also, the OS cannot see what happens before it boots up. If a power supply fails during the night and the system reboots itself, the OS might just wake up and say, unexpected shutdown. Doesn't know why.
It's blind to the hardware level, so the answer is C, lifecycle log.
Correct. The lifecycle log acts like the black box flight recorder on an airplane. Right. It lives on a non-volatile chip right on the motherboard. It records everything.
Like what kind of details?
Fan 3 slowed down on this date. User updated BIOS V1.2 to V1.3 on this date. RAID battery failed. It tracks all of this from the factory floor to the scrapyard, completely independent of whatever software happens to be running.
So if I buy a used server on eBay, I can check the lifecycle log and see exactly how much abuse it's taken over its life.
Exactly. It is the permanent medical record of the hardware. For the exam, any question about hardware history or persistent logs points directly to the lifecycle log. Good luck with the study, and good luck with the D-PE-OE-01.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.